Good evening and welcome to Growing Together in Grace. I'm Kathy.
I'm Ellen.
We're so glad you're here with us this evening. So Ellen and I have been sitting here thinking about how long it's been since we've last recorded our episode.
Yes.
An episode. Just life. Now that we're further from one another, it's harder for us to get together. Life is busy on both ends.
Yeah.
This is spring break week for Ellen, and so it worked out that we can get together and get an episode in. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah.
Before we start our episode, we like to do a quick life update.
Mm-hmm.
So Ellen, I'm going to let you go first.
Okay.
And just tell us what's going on in your life.
Oh, well. Oh, I guess I need to switch to 3.
Yeah.
So we are in the process of moving. We are selling our house to our 2 older children, my son-in-law, my daughter and son-in-law, and my oldest. And it has been, oh my goodness, a month-long ordeal. You know, finding a lender, helping the kids fill out paperwork, all of those things, making sure all of the things come together.
Yeah.
And so we are finally at the point where we have an appraisal coming up on Monday, scheduled for Monday. So the whole spring break, so my whole spring break has been, I have been cleaning my house, decluttering my house. And when I say decluttering, we're talking 30 years of memories. I have found things where I'm like, why in the world did I keep this? But I found some really sweet memories, just lots of, I remember that. Like today, I'm still cleaning out my our office. I finally am done today. Just, I need to do a little bit more of cleaning up, but I found my son's program when he graduated from boot camp. And then also all of the letters that he wrote to us while he was in boot camp. And I was like, oh my gosh, how sweet is this?
Mm-hmm.
So I saved that. And there's just so many cool things that I found. And then a lot of things Chad's like, just throw it away. Just throw it away. So I think I filled up about 6 or 7 bags worth of trash from my house that I'm not anywhere near done with. And with that, we are moving the end of this month. So I have 2.5 weeks to pack my stuff. And I'm not ready yet, yo. I'm not ready.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And then they're moving in after us. So their lease doesn't run out until the 15th of April. So they've got a little bit of time, but we're in a time crunch, Chad and I. So we are literally minimizing things. We're moving to a 2-bedroom apartment. We're going to do that for a couple of years. And then hopefully we are getting to the point where we're saving up for retirement. And then hopefully when the housing market gets better, we'll either buy another house or buy a piece of land and build. So one of the 2 things. But that's what's going on in my life. What about you, Kathy?
Well, for me, update would be that I'm 20 weeks pregnant now. I know that we mentioned in our previous episode the whole ordeal of we thought I miscarried and then I didn't miscarry. And there was some complications in the pregnancy and concerns there. But I actually had my 20-week ultrasound today. Aww. And got to see the baby for a very long time, which I'm not complaining. I was like, how long is this going to be? It was an hour.
Of ultrasound?
Yeah. Well, to be fair, my appointment was at 2:15 and it was probably more like maybe 45 minutes. And part of why it wasn't as long as it was because they had a training ultrasound technician.
Oh.
So they had the normal technician do all of it, but then they wanted her to come behind her and try to figure out the things herself as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you were like the training patient today. Okay.
Which I'm not going to complain about because this whole pregnancy, I've only seen the baby once. Mm-hmm. And that was when I went to get confirmation if I did miscarry or if I was still pregnant.
Yeah.
So that was really fun for me. I didn't get to tell you this at dinner, but the entire time during the ultrasound, the baby, so I'm having a boy. I know that I announced it on Facebook. Wasn't sure if we announced it here. He was incredibly active, flipping, turning, twisting. I mean, not still at all.
Yeah.
To the point where I might have to go back in and get an ultrasound on just the heart.
Okay.
Because they were having a hard time getting certain parts of the heart because
he was moving around too much.
He wouldn't go on.
Oh, boy.
And I was like, uh-oh. Because here's the thing. When I was pregnant with Dorothy, I prayed the whole time. I said, Lord, if it's your will, I pray that this child would take on and have a similar temperament as Jason.
Yeah.
Because my other two have, my oldest is like 100% temperament me.
Yeah.
My oldest daughter, she's a good, she might be 60% Jason and 40% me.
Yeah.
And then Dorothy is way more chill. So she's got her father's temperament.
Oh.
So I'm like, she's still by far the easiest kid we've had. And I'm like, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. And
you're going with this one.
So now, like, the joke was when people heard we were planning for number 4, why number 4? Your third is like perfection. Go out on perfection.
Yeah.
It's like, because I want another one. And now some of my friends are like, you're going out with a bang. I'm like, we'll see.
Well, I mean, if he's active and he's flip-flopping around, girl.
Well, to be fair, the caveat, the hidden message, I had tea right before I went.
Oh.
So, maybe it was the caffeine.
Oh, yeah, that would make sense then. Okay.
That's the hope.
That's good, though. At least,
Yeah.
He's moving around.
But I didn't show all the pictures to you, but in some of the pictures that I was able to see, ultrasounds are weird.
Yeah.
But there's some aspects that you can see. I feel like this baby has their father has Jason's like profile, like the nose shape, the way the chin was, more so than any of our other babies. Our other babies had my nose. Now Joshua, I'd have to go back and look at Joshua's ultrasound. I think he might have had Jason's. It's been 15 years for him, but this baby was like, oh, that is very much a Jason Allison profile. So that will be very cool to see. It will be cool to see what he ends up looking at.
And you're due in July.
So my due date's July 31st.
Okay.
But I'm a C-section mom. This will be my 4th. And the way that my doctor works is because I'm high risk for multiple reasons.
Okay.
My age and multiple C-sections and then the hemorrhage that I had, which did dissipate. But I found out today that I have a marginal cord, which means that my umbilical cord, normally your umbilical cord will attach to the center of your placenta. Mm-hmm. Mine has attached more to the bottom.
Oh.
And so what could happen, not always, is the baby is not getting near the nutrients that it needs.
Okay.
And so it stops to grow at a certain point.
Okay.
Which could be a problem.
Okay.
So around 32 weeks, I have to go in for another special ultrasound and see if the baby's growing the way that they want the baby to grow or not. And then we'll go from there. But so there's some risk factors. And so as a result of that, I will likely go like week 39 or week 38, depending on what the ultrasound shows. So,
and Dorothy's birthday is because Dorothy's
July 15th.
Oh, gosh.
So there is a chance if I go earlier than the week, there's a small chance that they could share a birthday.
Okay.
Unlikely.
Okay.
It's probably going to be, the C-section will probably be the week of the 20th, somewhere in there.
Okay.
But
all right.
Anyway, so we've been really trying hard to get ready, like think about arrangement of our bedroom and arrangement of Dorothy's for when the baby, because the baby and Dorothy will share a room for a few years.
Okay. Yeah.
The idea is that once Joshua heads off to college, if he does that at first, then we'll just each each child will move into a room.
Okay.
So that's the update on me. Just getting ready for baby.
Yeah. Wow.
We did just get back from Colorado. So.
Yes. That was you had a tough time on that trip.
Those first 3 days were hard.
Yeah.
Hard.
Altitude sickness. I had that with Austin. When we lived in Phoenix, we went to the Grand Canyon. And I got so sick and I ended up calling my doctor. My doctor goes, "Wait, are you in Phoenix right now?" I said, "Well, no, we're in the Grand Canyon." She goes, "Honey, you have altitude sickness. I would suggest after this trip that you not go anywhere high, that you need to stay in Phoenix. That's too high of an elevation for you." So
it's funny. Before we even got to Colorado, and I never struggle with this because they pressurize airplanes.
Oh, yeah.
But when I was on the plane, I started to have, I was struggling to breathe.
Oh.
Yes. I was actually thinking, I kept telling Jason, I'm not feeling. So I sat on the end aisle and he sat on the end aisle. The girls and I sat in one row and then Jason and Joshua.
Yeah.
And I kept telling him, I was like, I can't breathe well. So I'm like, I'm going to try to sleep and see if that helps. But I was legit thinking this might be the first time I'm going to have to pull down one of those oxygen masks so I can breathe. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Because I was struggling, but I was able to sleep until we were about 20 minutes out of Denver. And then I just dealt with it until we got to Denver. But then Denver is known as the Mile High City. So it's literally 5,280 feet.
Yeah.
So, but where we went was almost 10,000 feet.
Oh,
and I'm like,
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It was beautiful though. For sure.
Oh.
Okay.
Anyways.
So that's our update. I'm sure we can talk about a lot since it's been a minute since we recorded.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we'll get it together once we figure out stuff. I think it would be easier once I get out of school. Yeah. And then my husband's been coaching, so it's just been difficult. And then you guys were dealing with a lot of sickness too.
Oh my goodness, the whole month of February.
Yeah. I think we were supposed to come over, last week. And then she texts me. It's funny. She texts me. She goes, "Don't hate me." And I just laughed. I'm like, what's going on? She's like, "I'm sorry, we can't record." Because I think you forgot to mention it to Jason. To her husband. I was like, "I do not hate you. It's fine. Don't worry about it." Chad was exhausted when he came home from that soccer game because he didn't get home until after 10. But anyways.
Yeah, I realized too late that I hadn't told Jason, and Jason likes to have a heads up.
Yeah.
Especially if we're going to be doing something later in the day, which we did, and it was fun, and we loved it.
Yeah.
So that he can get stuff done that he normally doesn't get done during the week.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? I'll just tell Ellen. I'm sure they'll be okay with it. They may even be glad.
Yeah. We were fine. Chad was like, "Oh, okay, good. I can sleep."
Yes.
It's okay.
Yes.
Anyways.
So, okay. So it's a couple weeks ago, we posted on our Facebook page and our YouTube and on Instagram that we were starting a new series, and we just recently shared the episode on our page on education.
Yeah.
And so what Ellen and I are going to do today, normally I was thinking it would be cool if we separated these two episodes out, but I'm like, no, let's just talk.
Yeah.
Instead of making it so separate.
Yeah.
So in this episode, we're going to talk about school choice, and we're going to explain how we came to the conclusion of why they went the public school route and why we went homeschooling route. And it may be that we jump back and forth quite a bit, but the whole idea is just a conversation on school choice. Before we jump into that, I want to say this about school choice out there, and I'm sure we'll say this a lot throughout the episode. I truly, truly believe that as long as a family is praying and asking for the Lord's wisdom and guidance on what's best for their family and their children, that whatever education route you choose is the right one for you and your family.
Yes. Totally agree. Yes. Totally agree.
There is no one right answer. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not a better Christian because I homeschool my kids, and she's not a better Christian because she's doing
Right.
public school.
Right.
We
Exactly.
are just trusting God to lead us along the path that He's calling our family to.
Yeah.
And I say this because, unfortunately, we live in a world right now where moms are constantly comparing one another. Well, I never breastfed, or I did until my baby was 3, and I couldn't. Like, seriously, people.
Yeah, I know.
God created us as individuals in His perfect image with different goals, different dreams, different plans, different visions. Can you imagine if we were all literally the same person?
Yeah. And I think the point of what you were saying too is that you can learn different aspects about homeschool and also about public school that you didn't think about before or even have an inkling about. Because I know for me, definitely, like, I had some preconceived notions about homeschool children, homeschool families. And until I really got to know people who actually homeschooled and to understand why some of the reasons people put their did homeschool with their children, it made so much sense to me. And I understood the logistics of homeschool, how it was done. We tend to, as a society, think that, oh my gosh, public school is horrible, or oh my gosh, why would you homeschool your children? Because people just don't know.
Understand. Yeah, they don't know, understand.
Yeah, and our goal is to explain the different aspects of it and why we chose it, for our families. Yeah.
So what I was hoping we could do is you could talk first on how you came to the decision that you were going to do public school with your children, and then I can talk about how I came to the decision, and then we can just talk about the different aspects.
Yeah.
The pros, the cons, in betweens.
Yeah.
And then if something else pops up in your mind that you want to throw in there,
sure.
then go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
So let's start with you, Ellen.
Okay.
So share with me and us what led you guys to the public school route.
Well, to be honest with you, when we had kids, I stayed home with them, and I actually really honestly thought about doing homeschool with them. But then my husband knows how I am. He goes, Ellen, whoa, are you sure that is something that you want to do? He's like, I'm not telling you no, but I know how you are. Are you going to be able to handle being at home with the kids 24/7? How are you going to be as a mother and as a teacher? Think about those aspects. And, at that point in my life, my husband was right, because I did struggle staying home with the kids. And in fact, when I did stay home with the kids, my kids did Mother's Day out because I wanted them to have some social aspects. And then at the time, homeschooling in our community, because we lived in Fort Worth, I just didn't know a lot of people that homeschooled. The people that I knew, they put their kids in public school or a private school, and the things that I had heard from other people, of course, obviously now that I know more about homeschooling, were not true. Like, oh, well, sometimes some people who homeschool their kids, they don't really teach them what they need to know. And so, like, when they go out in society, they really don't know stuff. Or if they start going to public school, they're behind in education, So, I heard things like that. But I think that for us, because we both needed to work, that public school was an option. Now, we did look at private schools, but again, private schools are expensive. My kids, when we moved back, they actually went to a private school. It was the private school that we went to because we were alumni. Our kids got to go for a discount. But my son, he started kindergarten. Personally, for my son, he needed that social interaction with other children. He needed to be in social situations because with Austin, his like he was having trouble reading, and then he was also having some trouble with like social aspects of like being around other kids. So I wanted to expose that to him. I worked part-time in daycare, so he would go with me and he would be at the same daycare I was working at. But he just needed that social aspect. And so for him, he really thrived in a public school. You know, he was actually in elementary, he was GT. You know, once Austin started going to school, we put Ashlyn in school. Now, this was the time when we moved home. So that was when we were going to the private school. Now, there were a lot of people who were like, oh, you need to send your kids to a private school. Okay. I was a private school child. But I felt like my kids struggled more in a private school because there was social aspects in a private school, you know, money, social, economic status. That was difficult for my kids because we were living at home with my parents. We were both going to school. So it was difficult for my kids to be in private school. There were times where my kids struggled in a public school. You know, the book that I'm reading now that you gave me, and I cannot remember the name of the book, but you know, why put your kids in public school? And I loved what, you know, the author started saying in there. It was like, you know, if you're going to put your kids in a private school, make sure that they understand where you stand with God. You know, and so that was always an important thing to us with our kids, was discussing our relationship with Christ, why it's important to be like Christ, especially in a public school setting, because you're exposed to different things. My kids were exposed to a lot of things, but I also feel like with the public school, we kept a lot of open communication with our kids. Hey, how was your day at school? Tell me about your day at school. You know, what happened? And honestly, we had the best conversations about different situations and how to handle those situations. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and say there were times where my kids didn't struggle, because they did. Each one of them struggled when we went to public school. One struggled socially. The other one had trouble in high school, and the other one, we were having trouble with behavior. You know, but I have to say, for the public schools, like with my child that had a behavior, he was diagnosed with ADHD. So through the public school, we were able to get him the help that he needed, the education plan that he needed. And so that pretty much followed him through till he graduated high school. And, you know, my kids had some of the best teachers, some of the teachers that truly believed in my child, who invested in my child, who loved, you know, my kids. If I were to ask every single one of my kids now, because they're grown, who is your favorite teacher? They would be able to tell me at least one or two teachers that absolutely were influential in their life. The ones that they knew that they could go to and talk to and have these conversations with them. But for us, our choice for public school was just, you know, we couldn't at the time put our kids through homeschool. We didn't have the resources for that. Plus, my husband and I were both studying to be school teachers, public school teachers. And one of the things was, we're going to be teachers, whether it be in a public school or in a private school. Why would we homeschool our kids? You know, our kids also needs to have that experience of being in a public school, because we're public school teachers. What is it going to say to other people if we're public school teachers and, you know, we're kind of homeschooling them? What is that going to say to other people? You know, what kind of a witness is that? So those were some of the things there that we thought about. But like, really, you know, my husband grew up going to a public school. We both went to private school for a little bit. And so being in a school setting for us, that really, the thought process of putting them in either public or private school just was really, you know, now we were picky about the schools that we chose, you know, the private school that we chose and then the public schools. Now, there were times where we didn't really have a choice and our kids had to go to that particular school. But we're lucky in the sense that, you know, wherever my husband basically was working, our kids got to go to that school. And it was a sweet experience to have my kids experience that, you know, because my husband, when he taught, it's probably his third year teaching, he taught in the district that we're teaching in now, but the school that he was at, all of the schools were interconnected. So basically, Austin went to school with him. Ashlyn just would walk over to the middle school, and then she would actually walk her little brother over to the elementary school, and they were all right next to him. And so
That's
they would,
cool.
yeah, I love that. They were there. In fact, you know, Austin was there at school with Dad, and his hallway, the classroom that Chad was in, and then Austin was taking biology that year because he was a freshman. Chad would have to stand out in the hallway, and the classroom that Austin would come out of was kind of in the hallway he was at. And one day, this is a funny story. We still tell this story to this day. Austin was coming out of class, and Chad was standing there, and he was like, "Hi, son." Completely ignored his father. Completely ignored his father. So Chad's like, "All right, okay." Next day, he's staying in the hallway again, and Austin comes out of his room. He goes, "Son, come give me a big hug and a kiss." And everybody's turning around, and Austin's like, his face is red. And that day after school, Chad goes, "You didn't come give me a big hug, son." He goes, "Dad, really?" He goes, "Next time you're going to wave at me when I say hi to you in the hallway, right?" So the next day he comes out of his classroom. He goes, "Hi, son." He goes, "Hi, Dad."
That's funny. That's so Chad, man. And your son.
It was so funny, though. So those cool experiences. And then when I moved in one of the other school districts that I worked in, Ashlyn went to school with me. And so she was able to go, and she was at the high school. I was at the elementary school, but she was on the same campus with me, basically.
That's cool.
Yep. Yes. Got to get used to those buttons.
Oh.
See, it's on you. We'll get it together.
Jason can fix that.
It's okay.
2 is me, 3 is you. Sorry. We forgot the buttons, and Jason actually wired them differently. Normally when I push 2, it's the both of us.
Yeah.
And I was trying to change it up.
Opposite sides, too.
Yeah, so that is true. We are on opposite sides.
It's okay. Well, I feel like I've been talking a lot.
That's because that's the microphone that you have to talk in since you have the podcast voice.
I know.
Well, I mean, I asked you. I asked you first what made you decide to public school.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Yeah.
That's why we're talking a lot.
Yeah. Well,
okay, well, I'll go.
Yes.
Since it is on me.
Yes. What about you? What made you decide to homeschool your children?
Okay, so I'm going to have to do like backtrack.
Yeah.
So that I can get to my answer. Okay, so if you've been following our podcast long enough, you probably at this point have heard my testimony. Well, I had a unique opportunity in that I was exposed to the public school system. I was a little bit homeschooled, and I also went to private school.
Yeah.
So I got to see all 3 aspects of education. And I definitely think there are pros and cons of all 3. When I got married, at the time that I got married, I started to develop a group of friends that were a few years ahead of me in parenting and marriage and starting to have children. And they were starting to talk about education, and homeschooling started to become more of a topic of conversation around me.
Okay.
I was not clueless to homeschooling because my adopted mom had homeschooled my older sister for a few years, my brother for a few years. So homeschooling was always kind of in the back of my mind as an option. Well, then when I got married, I was thinking, I knew that God was calling me to be a stay-at-home mom at first. I knew that once we had children, I would be home with my kids. But I also wanted to have a degree in something that would allow me to be with my children.
Yeah.
In the sense, like education. The idea was if I got a degree in education, then wherever I taught, the kids would come with me.
Yeah.
And then I'd be off holidays and off for the summer. Yeah. So that's how I ended up in the education department, and one of the reasons why I became a teacher, not the main reason, but one of them. Well, then I had Joshua and stayed home with him and loved every minute of it. Well, not every minute of it. I loved being home with him.
Yeah.
The idea of having to work outside the home was just, in my mind, this is not an option.
Yeah.
I will live in a 1-bedroom apartment and we will drive one car. We'll do whatever we need to do to make it happen that I'm home with my kid. And my husband also was super supportive of that. So we stayed home. And then when it came time to put Joshua in school, when it came time for school, God had moved us and brought us to Texas. And the church that we ended up landing at, the majority of the people there homeschooled. There were a couple public school families, but for the most part, I would say 80% of the church homeschooled. Yeah. And so I would like to be honest and say without a doubt that I wasn't guilted into homeschooling my kid. There is probably some aspect of that where I felt like, oh, if I don't homeschool here, then I'm going to be looked upon as a terrible person.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So there was a little bit of that. Yeah. A little bit. But a big part of why we ended up deciding to homeschool at first was because my son was diagnosed with an anaphylactic allergy to milk and peanut. Yeah. And at the time, schools were not milk-free zones or peanut. That wasn't a thing. They
are now. Definitely are now.
And I'm like, I am not putting my kid in a classroom of 5-year-olds who get crap all over their face and then touch him. And then I get a phone call. Yeah. Your son's going to the hospital because he can't breathe. So that was an aspect of we need to protect him health-wise. Yeah. But for me, the biggest reason was I wanted my child to have a biblical worldview on all subjects. I really felt God was calling me to like teach my kid about science, but teach it from a biblical worldview perspective. I knew he wouldn't get that in a public school system. He could in the private school system, but we didn't have the resources for that. I mean, hello. Just today, we're praying about my son will start going to like a school starting next year because now that he will be in high school, we want him to have interaction with classmates and teachers. Yeah. He does have a class that he goes to and has been to for 2 years and has a teacher, but we want all subjects now. Anyway, all this to say, we were looking at different options and I was floored. Guys, listen to this. There's a Christian school here that's well known. $30,000 a year.
Yes, ma'am.
$30,000. That's wild.
I know. That's like a semester or 2 in college.
That's that's almost. I'm pretty sure
it's ridiculous.
Where we went to college. I mean, it's been several years. Yeah. So I don't know what the tuition is now, but.
It's insane.
30,000 would have been probably 3 years of our college education. What? I'm not paying $30,000. Yeah. Now, the church that we're at right now, a lot of people go to a private school it's still more money than let me just say this.
I got you, girl. I know.
I've considered it because it sounds great. When you hear this school was $30,000 and then you're like, oh, $10,000. But that's still a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we were the only reason why our kids went to the private school that they went to was because we used to go there and we were alumni and we got a discount.
Yeah.
And also my husband was in the ministry at the time, so we got a little bit more of a discount on that.
Yeah.
You know, plus a lot of the administrators knew who we were because we both graduated from there, and they were like, yes, we will take your children, you know. And so that, but normally, even that school now, I'm just like, oh, I'm pretty sure my parents didn't pay for my brother and I to go to school at that price. That's ridiculous.
It's crazy.
I completely understand.
So we knew private school would not be an option because it was just going to be too much.
Yeah.
Now, if I went and got a job, that could be a possibility. But again, I didn't want to. I wanted to be home. I didn't want to miss my children's first words and their first steps. And I didn't want to miss. I wanted to be the one who got to teach them to read. I wanted to be there for when they were like, oh, like the aha moments. I just felt like, oh, I would be so sad to miss that.
Yeah.
And so we, prayed about it. And then the year came for Joshua. The summer before he was supposed to start kindergarten, I just sat down and prayed and thought about, okay, what do I want in education for my children? And as I answered those questions, like, what was my vision? What was my hope? What did I want them to learn and grow? I knew they weren't going to learn about Christ in a public school system necessarily. They could maybe with friends and whatnot, but as far as like even just today in our science, we got to talk about how Christ perfectly designed the world, and like you don't get to really do that in the public school system.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge, huge, huge thing for us. And so as we answered these questions in our mind, it became very clear that the only way possible to teach according to these goals that we had for our kids was to homeschool.
Yeah.
Or maybe even do private school. And now, one of the things, even when you started when your kids started school, homeschooling is huge now. Like, especially in the greater Houston area.
There never used to be co-op groups. There was, I don't even think there was any support for that.
There are so much. There's like so much out there.
Yeah.
There's homeschooling meetups. It's just mind-blowing to me, especially here.
It's a huge community, actually.
Huge. It's huge. And so that's one of the blessings of living in a bigger area where homeschooling is huge.
Yeah.
So, based off a few of those things of Joshua's health struggles, of me answering those questions, of us praying and thinking, we really felt called to homeschooling. One of the beautiful aspects of homeschooling and really even education, if I'm honest, was it's a year by year process.
Yeah.
Like there were years where I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then I was like, no, this is just a hard season. I can get through this. And we did. We got through the hard season and ended up, being okay and doing okay. But each year we go back to the drawing board to see, okay, is this still the best route for our family?
Yeah.
And like this year, I am a little bit sad, but also like, oh, this is going to be fun. I think that my son, Lord willing, I have open house coming this week on Monday. I'm going to be going to an open house.
Oh, okay.
Have you heard of Scola?
I have.
Okay. There's something like that up here.
Okay.
And there's an open house I'm going to on Monday.
Yeah.
Where you get to hear about the program and you get to meet the different teachers and see what they have to offer.
Yeah.
So I'll be doing that on Monday, and I'm really praying and hoping it works out that my son can take all of his core classes that will transfer nicely onto his transcript for college.
Yeah.
And so we've been talking to him about how he needs to start preparing himself because he's probably going to no longer be being taught by me. Although I don't teach him necessarily anymore. We talk and engage about what it is he's learning about.
Because he already goes to somebody for math.
Yeah, he has a math teacher and a class classmates for there.
Yeah.
But like science, I'll do the science experiments with them. We'll do it all together as a group. But as far as reading the textbook, he reads the textbook and he takes the quizzes and takes the tests and does it all on his own. I mean, I just grade his work now.
Yeah.
But he's a self-motivator like that's just him.
Yeah. So that would be cool.
So I'm really looking forward to him getting to experience that for high school.
Okay. So he would still be like, it would kind of be like a school.
It's
it's a homeschool
co-op. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays is when he would take classes.
Okay.
And then Monday, Wednesday, and Friday he'd work from home. So they would do all the teaching in class, and then he would do the rest of his work at home.
Well, he's still home, but then he would,
But
a lot of our friends did that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm very excited about that because I feel like that's going to take some pressure off of me because I was thinking, okay, Lord, this is what we wanted, but I'm about to have a baby. I have a 3-year-old and a 7th grader next year. And 7th grade's a really hard year to homeschool because there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And then a high schooler. I need some wiggle room of like somebody to pick up. And then I was just praying and reached out to the homeschooling community in the Woodlands area because we live in the Woodlands area. We live in Spring, but
well, that's cool.
I'm very excited. I hope it works out.
I'm excited for you. Is Joshua nervous about this now?
He kind of is, and that's just because Joshua wants to know everything.
Right.
And he's a perfectionist.
Yeah. And
if he gets hung up on a problem, he has to speak to his teacher, like right then and there. I mean, you saw it today.
Yeah.
And we're trying to help him. Like, okay, listen, we know that you really need to know the answer to this, and that you have scoured the internet and you've looked at the books that we've gotten from the library or that we have at home.
Just wait.
And you really need your teacher to like confirm. You're gonna have to wait. Like sometimes you don't get your answer immediately.
Yeah.
So because of his perfectionist and his need to know everything, he's a tad nervous because he's not sure if any of these new teachers would be able to accommodate that because his math teacher handles him so well. He really does. He's so good with Joshua. And he loves Joshua, so it's a sweet relationship.
By the way, his math teacher was my husband's math teacher.
Yes.
So
Joshua will actually probably still take math with him, but I think we're trying to work it out to where he does it online.
Okay, good.
And then we'll meet with him once a month.
Okay, I was wondering about that. That's good.
I think so. So anyway, Josh will be doing a full-on, Lord willing, high school. Now, we are toying with the idea, depending on finances, if Evangeline can take 1 or 2 classes, start to do that so she can start getting ready. Because she hasn't taken Mr. Derek yet. She's been straight homeschooled. Yeah. I mean, we did CC for 2 years. So she's been a part of a community, but I don't want her to like go all the way through her junior high years and then bam, you're going to be going to high school. Yeah. With a bunch of people you don't know and new teachers. So we're toying with the idea of putting her into a couple classes that she would thrive in. Okay. Which would be like, so then that would like leave me home with the toddler and the baby. Yeah. So we're praying about that. But yeah, I'm very excited about that.
All right.
One thing I didn't mention as I was talking about homeschooling, and you can chime in on how you do this when you're doing public school. I'm sure I know what the answer would be. Yes. Yeah. Let's do it on one. One of the other aspects that I love about homeschooling is the flexibility. Yeah. So like, not this week, but 2 weeks ago, we went to Colorado for a week. Well, I homeschool, so yeah, my kids didn't have to take off. Like they didn't miss a whole week of school. Yeah. And then now they were able to bring their school with them. That's the other thing I love it is when I plan out the year, I can be like, okay, so this week, if you don't do this, you're going to get behind. And then we have to go into summer. And, so there's a lot of flexibility with homeschooling.
Yeah. I love that.
And allows for us to be able to travel and do and see the world Not to say you can't do that when you do public school, because I'm sure you guys took trips and did things.
We did. And the cool thing, I love that you guys are able to take trips and with your flexibility, because I am seeing in the public school system that, and a lot of it has to do with COVID, but there are so many children that do not have the experience, the background knowledge. I have kids that have never gone to the zoo, that have never traveled outside of the community, really. So I think that like field trips, going to different places, even when I was in private school, I remember we took a 9th grade trip, and we learned Texas history. It was the coolest thing. We went to San Antonio. We learned about the different historical events that happened. We went to a lot of museums. We stayed at a campground. It was like a camp where, that it was kind of like summer camp type place. And we slept in like this huge area. But we also, as a class, got to do these team building activities. So just to be able to experience that, they don't do that a lot anymore. When I taught 5th grade, and this was in a public school, this was in one of the bigger districts in our area, they actually have a hands-on learning science school out in Huntsville. And we took all of our 5th graders. I was one of 4 teachers that went as a chaperone. And we actually had our own dorms. And then it was a couple of the other schools within the district. And all of the teachers slept in one dorm. And then the kids slept in different cabins they had counselors on camp. But they learned so much things. They got to go canoeing. They got to go hiking. They got to explore, do different sciencey activities. So stuff like that. I think that's great that you guys are able to do that. And then like just bring the work with you. And like they get to do the work while they're experiencing family time, but also learning. Like, who gets to go skiing? I was like, man, I wish I was there because I was missing. I was missing y'all, but anyways, but I just think that's cool.
Yeah,
I love that.
And another thing that so the other cool thing about like homeschooling is there's so much out there now.
Oh yeah.
So much. And one of the things that I had right before COVID, I was really praying about how our day would be structured and how our year would be structured and what I wanted for our family.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we do, if my kids listen to me, if they got up first thing in the morning and got ready for the day and had their breakfast and cleaned up breakfast and sat down and didn't leave their schoolwork until they were finished, they would be done by noon.
Yeah.
Whereas, like even Joshua, in the public school system, you're there for how many hours?
8 hours.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Yeah. 7.5.
So there's like 3.5, 4 hours where my kids can, after they've done the core work, they can create and do the things that they love and want to grow in.
Yeah.
That you can't at the public school. And part of why you can't at the public school is because it's one teacher to 25 kids.
Yeah.
And half the time you're disciplining kids who are out of control.
Yeah.
And so that puts you behind. And that's why school days are, I know I'm speaking to the choir here.
Yeah.
Because I taught for 2 years before I and so I'm like, I actually, in one of the classes that I taught, there was a kid in that classroom who was gifted.
Yeah.
Genius, gifted. But in that area, there was no gifted program.
Yeah.
And his parents didn't want to put him a grade above because emotionally they didn't think he was ready for that. So
he's bored.
He's suffering, literally suffering, because the rest of the kids in his class, I was an American Reads tutor in that class. I had 8 kids on my team who were, this is 3rd grade. They were reading right at the kindergarten level. 8 of the 24 kids. The rest of the kids were,
Yeah.
But there's this one kid, so he was acting up, causing problems, and it was because he's like, he has no business being in this classroom.
He was bored. Yeah.
So, but they didn't have a place for him. And I'm like, see, like, this is one aspect of public school that irks me, because we just have a lot of undisciplined. And I've heard from many friends, I think even you, but many of my friends that teach after COVID, I've heard these past couple of years
have been rough,
have been awful.
I actually looked up statistic wise, like since COVID, how many teachers have left.
Wow.
Since I think it said 2021, 64,000
left. Wow.
Left teaching within their first 5 years of teaching. And Kathy, it's really sad, because I remember when I became a teacher. In fact, when I was graduating, there was a hiring freeze in the state of Texas. They were not hiring any more teachers because it was to capacity.
Yeah.
You know, I was one of the lucky ones because they just switched over to the certification from EC through 4th to EC through 6th. I was in that group of teachers that were graduating where we took the EC through 6th test. And I did not get a job until late summer, literally 3 weeks before school started. And it was in a district that was more than an hour away. I live in Missouri City, and my first school district that I taught in was in New Caney.
Wow.
That was a drive, girl. I did that for 2 years. But I mean, there were so many people going into the profession that they could not hire teachers because there was no positions. Now, I cannot tell you how many positions we have open every year. Because I'm on leadership, I have gone for the last 4 years to the hiring event for our district. And almost every school in my district is hiring. There's a huge need. People are tired. Ever since COVID, it's just been a struggle because there is a huge learning gap from when we had COVID, because we had to teach online, and we were not equipped as public schools to teach online.
And if you think about it, from like knowing some of the stories, there are some people who didn't have access to be able to do online.
Yeah.
You don't have the accountability from parent. Like there's so much. So yeah, I've just heard it's really.
And then we would have parents sitting there. The answer is 6. The word is I had to, because I did my groups online. I had to tell the parent, ma'am, please don't help your child. I cannot effectively do my job if you are giving them the words to read.
Because then you don't know where it is that...
Exactly. Yeah. I can't help your child if you're telling him what to do.
I have a friend who's a professor at a university, and they were telling me that they can tell when their parents write their papers. I was like, really? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Because I see what they write, like, because he'll do like a pop quiz writing.
Yeah.
I see what they write during class, and then I see what they turn in. I'm like, no.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You should have seen the work that we got. I was like, wait a minute. You are barely passing my class. And now this is like word for it. These are like big words. I'm like, wait a minute. Are we in second grade or are we in 6th grade?
That's interesting.
Like words that they would misspell. It was perfectly spelled, and it just the quality of the work. It's like, this is not the child's work. It's clearly the parent's work.
Yeah, that's tough.
Just things like that. Like there's such a dire need for teachers. They are saying that the education department in colleges, they barely have any people applying for that now, which is so sad. Even when I started teaching, it has changed dramatically. Family dynamics have changed too. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have so many kids now that come from single families. You're bouncing back and forth with mom and dad, or you're living with grandma. We are dealing with a lot of homelessness. A child is considered homeless if they're living with a relative. Just so many things that we're dealing with in the public school system, and we don't have enough good teachers.
Yeah.
We just don't. And a lot of teachers are tired because we don't have enough teachers. That's more work on us in public school, and it's difficult. But one of the things I know for Chad and I, when we decided to get into education, was, you have to be called. It's a ministry. It literally is a ministry because you don't get paid the salary. You deal with so many different dynamics, administrative dynamics on your campus, parent dynamics, family dynamics, classroom dynamics. It literally is a ministry. I mean, it's one of the things that we both felt like we were called to be in. Ever since we were working in the children's home, our heart has been teaching children in the public school education because there's so many kids that just come from broken homes. I mean, I cannot tell you 17 years of teaching. Some of the things that I have seen my students go through home-wise, what they're exposed to, what they see. I mean, a lot of times school is the only place of safety or haven where they feel like they're getting, even they may be acting out, but it's because they're allowed to do whatever they want at home, or there's just not a parent there or whatever. I love some of the hardest students. I mean, like the ones that sometimes teachers are like, I can't do anything with this kid. They're too much of a behavior problem. I can't. I mean, I'm thinking of a brother and sister at school. She was a tough little cookie, and I even had her in my groups for a little bit. But I can't tell you, that girl comes up to me every day, gives me a hug, and she has a smile on her face. I've seen her grow from where she was to where she is now. And just the change, even her brother from where he was to where he is now. And it's because there's so many people in the school that care so much about them. It's not just me, it's just other people. I love those dynamics and aspects of being a public school teacher because there's just so many kids out there that just don't have that stability at home, and school is the only place they get it.
Yeah.
That's where they get it. So
at any point when you were teaching, I mean, you still are, but when you had children at home, did they ever ask or want to be homeschooled, or not really?
Actually, not really.
Okay.
I mean,
that's fair.
It was really tough though, because I think for each of them, there was an aspect of being in school, a public school, where they really struggled. I had a child that really struggled with being bullied, being made fun of. That was really tough to watch that child go through. I had another one that had a really difficult time in high school. And then another one where, the behaviors were acting up until this child got diagnosed with something, So those were really difficult. But again, it's just watching them and just really having that open dialogue with them. I mean, they told me things that I'm like, whoa. I mean, I remember Ashley was in middle school one day in 8th grade, and we were driving in the car, and she goes, yeah, they had to get so-and-so out of the classroom. I said, oh, why? We're driving home. She goes, oh, because his girlfriend was going into labor. Excuse me? This is 8th grade.
Oh, man.
So we had this conversation of, tell me about that situation, and, what, to have that conversation about, the decisions that you make when you're in school, the pressures that you feel from other people, what to do, what not to do, so we had a really good conversation on the way home with that. And I love that aspect is that, they see something at school. They have always felt open to come talk to both Chad and I about different things. And I could just recall different things that each one of our kids would tell us different things that happened at school. And well, how did you handle that? And that was a great dialogue of, well, if this happens, what are some ways that we can help in that situation, And so it's helping them to how to react with different things that are happening at school.
Yeah.
And so that's, I like that aspect of that.
Well, and I'm going to jump in here on the homeschooling side.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people would come at this point in the conversation, like, and see, homeschoolers aren't socialized and they don't get to be a part of stuff like that. And so they are like antisocial and like, when it comes, because they're not used to those things.
Right.
Well, here I am now. Sadly, there are homeschooling families that are antisocial, meaning they stick. Okay.
1 hour.
We're coming up an hour. They stick to their circle, right? Like this is our community, and we're not breaking out of it.
Yeah.
One of the things that Jason and I made so very clear when we started this journey was that's not going to be us. We are going to be in and out of the world. We are going to be very much a part of the world because we are called to be in this world.
Yes.
We're called to bring the gospel to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so we will go places with our children. Like one of our favorite places to hang out is it's a brewery.
Yeah.
And all kinds of people come to the brewery. It's a family-friendly brewery, but all kinds of people. And I will never forget this particular day. We're sitting at a table, my husband and I, with another family. Like, we don't know them, but our kids are with us. And I'm like, this is going to be interesting because it was during the Astros. It was a World Series game. It's a day game. And so they're going to ask questions like, where are your children not in school or whatever. My kids are engaging with these adults and having conversations with these adults.
Yeah.
My daughter goes somewhere and then later a lady comes back. Cute lady comes back. She goes, hey, are you Evangeline's mom? And I was like, oh no. Because sometimes Evangeline, she's like, I'm just curious if I'm like, yes, I'm Evangeline's mom. She's like, she tells me she's homeschooled. Is this true? I'm like, it is true. She's like, I'm here to tell you that I was flabbergasted by this. I'm like, why? She's like, she is one of the most social individuals and talkative and like engaging homeschooling kids I've ever met.
Oh, that's
And I was
funny.
like, really? She's like, oh yeah. Like, I just love her. And her husband is a professor at Rice University.
Oh, how funny.
So he's a physics professor. He's like, yes, I am just amazed.
That's
and
funny.
I was like, that is so funny. And they are friends of ours now because my daughter just started a conversation with her.
And I have to jump in here because because you told me, because when y'all were living by us, your kids would hang out a lot with the neighborhood kids. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was a couple of things where you had to have conversations with Joshua, like about different situations. But I love how your kids interacted with the neighborhood kids, and then they would hang out. And then I remember a couple of times where I think like we would come up and drive up to y'all's house, and they were playing basketball outside, and I was like, "That's cool," you know. So I love that. I love that they interact with people,
and so that's the other thing about the concern, like a lot of people have with homeschoolers, is they don't get the socialization they need.
Well, see, now I have seen that too, where like they stick into their own clique.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's when Jason's like, we're that's not going to be us.
Yeah.
But there's like, Joshua, once he started Little League, I remember thinking, okay, he's old enough. I knew he was going to come home with some questions. Mm-hmm. So he would come home with questions of one of his teammates has 2 moms. Mm-hmm. Like he was 6, I think.
Yeah.
Like, how do you have two moms? I'm like, that's a really great question. So let's talk about this.
Yeah.
And so we would talk about it. And then now he's coming home. He's like, oh, because he's now in a high school league.
Yeah.
They cuss all the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, but I'm sorry. It's a public little league. Like that's. And he's like, what do I do? I was like, you can ask them kindly if they would respect you, but you also have to know that like, that's just how they talk. Mm-hmm. So you can ask them to not speak that way in front of you. That doesn't mean they won't. And if they still do, you can just go somewhere else in the dugout.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's beauty in being able to like train and disciple and homeschool for the first several years to like build on that foundation.
Yeah.
So that when they're in the public school arena or the public school world, they have that foundation that's been built up.
Yeah.
Now, I know like there are people who feel called to teach in the public school and they don't have near the time to build up. So it's like they have to be, I don't know if you've listened to this podcast yet, that where Jen Wilkin talks about why they did public school. And she talks, one of the things she mentioned, I'll send you that podcast. Okay. One of the things she mentioned in her podcast was she and her husband had to be absolutely diligent in talking about Jesus and their family.
Yes.
And if they weren't, then that's when the world creeped in and took over.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's that hard aspect of doing public school is if you aren't diligent in teaching the gospel and speaking the gospel and making it a part of your lives, then the world can come in and, you know, wreak havoc or whatever.
It's also important to, I think I mentioned this earlier, that if you're sending your kids to public school is making sure you are open to them coming. Even like there was some hard discussions we had with some of our with our kids about different topics. And so not like being like, I can't believe that you're hanging out with these people, or like you didn't say anything. I don't ever feel like it was like that. It was always, I'm so glad that you felt like you were able to come to your dad or I to talk to us about this situation, you know, building it up that way, because, you know, what we didn't want from our kids was the hiding things, you know, not telling us everything. You know, we struggled with that with one child, but, you know, in the end, now as adults, all three of my children, there were some rough aspects of putting them in a public school, but in the same context, to me, they have all grown up to be three individuals that are able to think for themselves, stand up for themselves, know the difference between right and wrong, love God, all of those things. And it was because they felt comfortable coming to us.
Yeah.
Is making sure you're having that open dialogue with your kids all the time.
Yeah.
And knowing that they can come to you, because Chad was also very adamant about, you know, you guys can come to us about everything, anything, even if it's something hard or like you did something wrong.
Yeah.
We want you to come to us and being open like that.
Well, that's important in every aspect, even in relationships in general.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I love is the creating that openness with our children.
Yeah.
But anyway, so those are the big things. Now, I'm going to come at the angle of there are some aspects that I miss in the homeschooling world. One of them being it. Now, this is changing because there's a lot of opportunity happening with like different types of co-ops. But like in the public school, I remember Jason doesn't do it as much anymore, but he has done for years videos for a few schools in the Fort Bend district. There are different plays.
Yeah.
And there's one high school that does phenomenal plays.
Ridgepoint.
And I'm like, oh, like I
bet it was Ridgepoint.
I want my kids to be able to have that because I love that.
Yeah.
Like, I love those things. But there are ways that homeschooling families can do that now. You just have to pay a lot of money.
Yeah.
There's there's theaters that my kids, I'm actually currently looking at one for Evangeline in the Cypress area. There is a theater in the Cypress area where you pay, I think it's $100 a month or something to be a part of it. And then she can still do theater. But if she were in a public school system, I would have to pay $100 a month.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect. Yeah. But you know, so there's that. And then there's like sports, for instance. My son is a talented baseball player. He's a good baseball player, talented, good. And
Evangeline still does
volleyball. She switched to volleyball.
Okay. Okay.
But she did basketball.
But both of your kids do sports.
So they love that. And that's hard in the homeschooling community. There are homeschooling leagues that you can be a part of, but unfortunately, like in this area, the two are so far from us.
Oh,
that for us to be able to do them, we would be driving so much, and they cost money.
Oh,
whereas, like if he went to Spring High School, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's those aspects, but at the end of the day, it always boils down to, and we tell this to Joshua, for our family, their walk with the Lord is more important to us than anything else.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care if you, like, I would rather you love Jesus than be a professional baseball player.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have to decide what's important to you.
Yeah.
And what God's calling you to.
Also, too, one of the things that we wanted our kids try and instill in our kids is like, hey, you're a light for Christ in a public school. And I know it's really hard to be different than other people, but we're called to do that. So, like, in a sense, our kids were in the ministry as with us, you know, because I love the way our pastor put it, because his wife, she teaches at a private school, but their two oldest go to a public school. And one of the things he said was, you know, our kids are on the mission field. They're in the mission field in a public school. You know, we want them to be able to share the love of Christ with other people at school. And so I was like, I love that, you know, and that's one of the things that we've told our kids too in the past is like, we're Christians. You're called to be a light for Christ to other people. Yeah. So, you know, just remember that when you're at school every day.
Yeah.
Now, did they always do that? No, but
and the other aspect is like I would to John, I think I may even said this. Yeah. I would have said you can also be a light and as a homeschooling student.
Yeah.
Because one of the cool things about in the homeschooling world and socialization, this is going to be a long podcast episode, guys. When you homeschool, the idea of socializing cracks me up, because in the public school system, let's step outside of education for a second. When you work in a work setting, are you in a group with everyone who's the same age as you?
You mean like,
do you get what I'm saying?
Like teachers? Like,
let's just take all your teachers that you work with. Are you guys all the same age?
No.
Okay. But a lot of the flack homeschooling people get is like, oh, your kids aren't socialized. Let's think about this. You're telling me that my child needs to be in a classroom of 24 8-year-olds to be socialized. Whereas right now, my kid, throughout the day, because that's the other cool thing about homeschooling is when we finish, we get to leave and go to the grocery store and pick up groceries. And my kid's interacting with the cashier who's 25 years old.
Yeah.
We go to the gas station. We go to Chick-fil-A. We go to a park. They're talking to adults. They're talking to 3-year-olds.
Yeah.
They're literally socializing with everyone from toddlers all the way up to people who are in their 30s.
Yeah.
Not 25 8-year-olds.
Yeah.
So I always have made the argument. In fact, in my speech class in college, I made the argument. I think you can be better socialized in homeschooling. However, there are those caveat families who paint the bad light for the homeschooling community, whose kids don't interact with anyone because they're the whole family is antisocial.
Yeah. Gotcha.
But our family is in and out of the community all day long, all week long.
Yeah.
So the aspect of socializing is a funny idea to me, because I'm like, my kids socialize with ages from like one of the people that my son talks to the most. Yeah. Bless his heart. Is a man at our church who is 86 years old. Yeah. I think he's somewhere in his 80s though. And I was like, oh, I am so like,
yeah. I could so see that though. That's great, because kids nowadays, they don't really want to talk to other people or other adults, or even themselves. Yeah. You know, I mean, not themselves, but like kids their age, you know?
So you don't have to answer this question, but I'm curious. So when you guys did when you guys were in the public school system, your children at least, how did you make Christ a priority in your kids' lives? You know what I mean? Like, because like here's the example on my end. You know, in the mornings, we start off our mornings with like family worship, where we read through. Right now, we're going through the book of Genesis, and we're talking about things, and like even
whoops,
Dorothy.
I was wondering. I'm like, oh, knock that down.
She's not quite 3. It's water, in case you don't know. She's not quite 3, but she casually overheard us, because she plays with her puzzles. Way the big kids and I have our worldview, biblical questions. She's like, Daddy, Satan was a bad angel and he fell. I'm like, for a 2.5-year-old, I'm impressed. Like, that's amazing.
That's hilarious.
So I'm curious when you are because let me just tell you my perception, which is like, or at least when I taught for 2 years, I get to school like 7:30 in the morning, get home at 5. Well, then I'm exhausted by the time I get home. Yeah. And then you got to cook dinner, and then the kids go to bed. So how are you, how is Christ a part of your life when you are in the public school? Like, how are you doing that? What does that look like?
So I will be the first to say that when the kids were younger, we were not great at doing like family devotionals. And there were times where now I'm thinking, God, I wish we could go back in time and do that. We did spend a lot of time in prayer with our kids,
you guys are really gifted in prayer
and praying with them and for them. Chad was a youth minister for 5 years, so we were very involved in church. Like the kids were, we did Awanas. The kids were in children's choir, youth choir, choir as adults. My daughter was volunteer in the nursery. We did youth camps every year. We did children's camp every year. We were very involved in church. At home, I wish when they were growing up, but I also think too, a part of it was the way our walk, both Chad and I, our walk with the Lord sometimes was not as strong. So it wasn't going to be strong with our kids. I am thankful for the fact that because we were very involved in church, there were so many other influential people that loved on my children, that would pray for my children. I mean, when my son went away into the Army, when he was deployed, we had people praying for him 24/7. Adults that poured into all 3 of my children. The same adults that came back to watch my son get baptized. I'm thankful for those people that even though maybe I wasn't as invested as a parent that I should have been at that time, there were so many other people that the Lord placed in my kids' life that my kids are still close to. The former youth minister at our former church, my daughter still talks to his wife from time to time. They text each other.
That's cool.
Things like that. I'm thankful for that, you know. So we had a really strong church family that helped carry us through those child rearing years. And a lot of the people, a lot of the kids that were at our church before we merged, their kids went to public school. So they were kind of in the same situations as we were. And so I'm really thankful for the strong church family that was poured into my family when my family needed it and my kids got through school.
So what I'm hearing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is a big aspect was being involved and a part of a healthy church community.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's awesome.
And that just, that brought all three of my kids to Christ. Was just all of those church people that were a part of their lives. Like they knew these kids from when they were young.
That's awesome.
And grew up with them and still keep up with them and still ask how the kids are doing.
That's awesome.
And then now they're saying, I'm old now. Ashlyn has a daughter. And stuff like that. So yes, being a part of a strong church family was very helpful for us.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy. Well, I'm sure that we've missed something.
Oh yeah.
Just because Ellen and I decided this episode, we're just going to talk.
Yeah.
Normally we have a little outline and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's like, let's just talk today.
And yes, this is a long podcast, so hopefully you stayed with us. But we really thought that it would be cool to come through the aspects of public school, homeschool, the different aspects of it, and just, share our points about that. Yep.
So if you have any questions, like we've said in previous episodes, please leave a comment in our YouTube.
Yeah.
Or even when this gets posted on our Facebook page, you can share a question there. We are happy to answer any questions you might have. And we're thankful that you listened, hopefully.
Yes, hopefully. You stayed with us.
Yes. And then our next episodes will probably separate. Hey, listen. Sorry, I'm interrupting myself. I'm like, time out. Listen, this episode might be long, but our next 2 episodes are not going to be as long because they're going to be a book review on the book Ellen's reading and the book I'm reading.
My book.
Well, the way we've been able to find a time to record, we'll finish
I should be able to.
Yeah. Anyway, because you're moving too, so we're gonna wait. We're gonna have to wait until you get settled. So all of this to say, our next 2 episodes will be book reviews, and then maybe if we get questions, we can do like a Q&A.
Yeah.
Like if questions come in, that last episode can be the questions that people send us.
Yeah.
In fact, I like that idea. I might put something on our Facebook page.
I just remembered I did not post in the Facebook page today. I was so busy.
It's fine. Anyway, so I'm coming from the perspective of homeschooling. Ellen's coming from the perspective of public school. We've enjoyed this conversation. Yeah. We talk about it a lot.
Yeah, we don't get to talk very often.
I know.
We text more, but it's okay.
We do text more.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Kathy.
I'm Ellen.
And we're growing together in grace.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.